An ordinary taxi ride turned into a real nightmare. A traffic conflict turned into a fight, and then a shot rang out. From this moment on, the life of an 8-year-old child will never be the same again. Trauma, fear, long months of treatment, all after a few seconds of aggression on the road. But will the guilty suffer a fair punishment? Will the mother be able to win the truth in court? And what shocking confession will be heard in the hall? Find out all the details of this high-profile case. Chapter 1: Accidental Encounter. Morning Chicago woke up to the buzzing of cars and the bright light of neon signs that had not yet had time to go out after the nightlife. Emily Johnson hurried down the stairs of her apartment complex, clutching a gym bag in one hand and the palm of her 8-year-old son, Tyler, in the other. The boy was excited. He had an important figure skating practice today, and he couldn't stand being late. "Mom, what if we're late?" Tyler asked nervously, looking down the street where their taxi was supposed to pull up. "Don't worry, dear. We are on time." Emily squeezed his palm, reassuring. A few minutes later, a black Chevrolet Malibu pulled up to the curb. The driver, a 45-year-old man, opened the back door, giving them a friendly nod. "Are you Mr. Morgan?" Emily asked. "Yes, David Morgan." "Sit down, we'll make it," he smiled, glancing in the rearview mirror. The car smoothly moved from the place. The traffic was lively because the morning in the metropolis is always a hustle and bustle. Tyler looked out the window at the tall buildings, his eyes shining with admiration. But after a few minutes, the idyll was interrupted. A black Dodge Charger suddenly appeared from behind, driving at a high speed. He suddenly changed lanes. Without warning, he crashed between the cars and almost hit the Chevrolet. David Morgan managed to sharply turn the steering wheel, skillfully avoiding a collision. "Damn," he shouted, reflexively slamming on the brakes. "What kind of idiot?" Emily, instinctively covering Tyler with her hand, looked around anxiously. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Yes, just if I hadn't had time to react, we would be in the hospital now," David answered with irritation, clutching the steering wheel. Tyler glanced nervously at his mother. "Mom, what happened?" His voice trembled. "It's under control, honey. It's just that some people don't know how to behave on the road," Emily reassured him, stroking his head. But David wasn't about to just let this situation go. His hands were clenched tightly around the steering wheel, his jaws clenched. "I won't leave it at that," he muttered. And he pressed the gas, starting to catch up with the offender. Chapter 2: Conflict on the Road. David hit the gas, maneuvering between cars. The Chevrolet Malibu moved confidently forward, closing the gap on the black Dodge Charger that was still racing ahead. Anger was burning in his eyes, and he wasn't going to let it go unanswered. "Mr. Morgan, please don't," Emily said excitedly, hugging Tyler to her. "He almost killed us. Although I would apologize," David snapped, keeping his eyes on the target. A red light flashed ahead. The Dodge Charger slammed on its brakes, and David stopped right behind. He quickly opened the door, ignoring the honks of the cars behind him, and strode confidently towards the driver of the other car. A man with thick stubble and close-cropped hair sat behind the wheel. He was stocky and had the look of a man who was not used to apologies. His eyes flashed coldly when he saw David. "What do you need?" he said indifferently, barely lowering the glass. "You almost killed me and my passengers." Morgan's voice was strained. "So what? Did you survive?" "That's fine," the man said disdainfully, clearly not intending to explain himself. David clenched his fists. The tension in the air grew with every second. "Apologize to the woman and the child," he ordered, taking a step forward. "And if not?" A smile played on the stranger's lips. He seemed to enjoy this confrontation. Emily watched from the car, heart pounding. Tyler, trembling, hid in her arms. "Mom, let him come back." But David had already lost his self-control. He flung open the door of the Dodge, grabbed the driver out, and pushed him back. The stranger staggered, but immediately reacted by punching David in the shoulder. And so they were already fighting in the middle of the road, not noticing how the traffic light turned green, how the drivers behind were honking, and shocked passers-by took out their phones, filming the fight. Emily covered her mouth with her hands, not believing her eyes. "Lord, stop," she shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos around her. Suddenly, the stranger broke free from the struggle, staggered, grabbed his side, and then, turning around in a flash, reached for the glove box of his car. Tyler cried, clinging to his mother. "Mom, will he get a gun?" His voice trembled. Emily felt her chest tighten with fear. She instinctively grabbed her son tighter, unable to take her eyes off the man who was already turning around. Chapter 3: Consequences. Time seemed to stand still. The street became silent, all sounds become muffled, as if through a column of water. In the hands of the man glistened a black traumatic pistol. Frank Stevenson, the same Dodge Charger driver, raised the barrel and, without hesitation, pulled the trigger. A loud shot tore through the air. David Morgan jerked violently, as if struck by an invisible force, and fell to the asphalt. Everything froze for a moment. Then a desperate cry rang out in the car. "Nei!" Emily screamed as she pulled the trembling Tyler to her. The boy howled with fear, hugging his mother, and his eyes, full of horror, looked at the motionless body of the taxi driver. David gritted his teeth, trying to get up, but his body wouldn't listen. Frank took a quick look around, as if weighing the situation, and then, without a word, jumped into his car and hit the gas. His Dodge pulled away, leaving behind the smell of burning and rubber. Emily couldn't breathe. She forced her fingers apart and focused. "We must act." Her hands frantically reached for the phone. 911. Ambulance and the police. "There is a shooting." Her voice broke from panic. She ran out of the car, glancing quickly at David. He moved, holding his side. There were no visible traces of blood, but his face was twisted in pain. "Do you hear me?" she asked, leaning over him. David tried to nod, but only groaned. After a few minutes, the sound of sirens was heard. The police and ambulance arrived almost simultaneously. Two paramedics quickly lowered the stretcher and began examining the wounded man. "He's in shock, but it's not life-threatening," one of them said, checking David's vitals. The policeman, a tall man in a dark blue uniform, approached Emily. "Are you a witness? What happened?" Emily felt her legs twitch again. She nodded, forcing herself to speak. "We were going in a taxi. That man in the black Dodge cut us off. The taxi driver stopped, went to him. They started fighting, and then he took out a gun and shot." Her voice broke. The policeman wrote everything down in a notebook. "Are there any more witnesses? Do you know the name of the shooter?" "No, but I remembered the number of the car." She suddenly exclaimed and began to quickly dictate the numbers. "Okay, we'll pass it on to the patrols. And now we need to take your official testimony." Emily looked at Tyler. The boy was sitting in the car, all pale, speechless, but his eyes, they were no longer childish. They saw what no 8-year-old boy should see. And she understood. The real consequences of this event are yet to come. Chapter 4: The Trial. The courtroom in Chicago was filled with people. Emily Johnson sat on the plaintiff's bench, holding the hand of Tyler, who looked pale and exhausted. His little fingers gripped his mother's hand as if it were the last thread holding him to a world where he could still feel safe. Judge Robert Henderson, a gray-tempered man with a hard but fair gaze, tapped his gavel. "Court is open. The case of Johnson v. Stevenson and Morgan. Plaintiff, please state your statement." Emily stood up. Her voice was firm, even though she felt broken inside. "Your Honor, my son Tyler witnessed a terrible event. He saw a person being shot. He saw her fall to the ground, thinking that he had died. After that, he cannot sleep normally. He starts stuttering. He is afraid to leave the house. It changed his life forever, and all because of irresponsibility and aggression of the defendants." The judge nodded and looked at the first defendant, David Morgan, who sat with his head down. "Mr. Morgan, do you admit that you started the conflict?" asked the judge calmly but sternly. David sighed. "Yes, Your Honor, but I didn't know that scumbag would get a gun. I just wanted to put it in place." Did you initiate a physical confrontation? Clarified the judge. Yes. Morgan admitted grimly. The judge turned his gaze to the second defendant. Frank Stevenson looked cocky and even a little annoyed. Mr. Stevenson, did you admit that you shot Mr. Morgan? Frank shrugged. Yes, but it was self-defense. He was the first to rush at me. The judge frowned. Do you consider it justified to use firearms against an unarmed man? Frank looked away, clearly nervous. Well, maybe I overdid it a bit, but if he hadn't attacked, this wouldn't have happened. Emily's defense attorney, Attorney Thomas Reeves, stood up. Your Honor, here is a medical report on the psychological state of the child, as well as an extract from the bills for his treatment. My client spent over $15,000 rehabilitating the boy and counting. In addition, the moral influence on the child is irreparable. The judge looked through the documents, tapping his fingers on the table. Finally, he spoke. The court makes a decision. Both defendants bear responsibility. Mr. Stevenson, you must pay $50,000 in punitive damages to the child. Both defendants jointly reimburse $15,000 for treatment. Frank let out a loud breath, but said nothing. David nodded silently. Emily squeezed Tyler's hand, who looked at her for the first time in a long time with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. She knew the fight wasn't over yet, but justice had at least partially been restored. Chapter 5. Judgment. The courtroom froze in anticipation. Judge Robert Henderson looked up from the documents and looked at the defendants. There was tension in the air, an almost physically palpable electric charge. Frank Stevenson crossed his arms over his chest and tapped his foot nervously on the floor, while David Morgan sat sullenly as if resigned to the inevitable. The judge took the gavel and loudly hit it on the wooden stand. The court has made a decision. His voice was calm but commanding. Given the circumstances, both defendants are responsible for the moral and physical consequences the child suffered. Frank leaned forward sharply. Your Honor, it was self-defense. His voice crackled with irritation. He was the first to rush at me. Why should I pay for this? The judge just looked at him sternly. You could have avoided the conflict, Mr. Stevenson. Instead, you choose to use a weapon. The child witnessed an act of violence that resulted in severe psychological trauma. Therefore, I order you to pay compensation in the amount of $50,000 for moral damages to Tyler Johnson. Frank clenched his teeth and slammed his fist down on the table. This is some kind of delusion. One more breach of order and I'll increase the fine, the judge sternly warned. Frank let out a stifled breath, lowering his head. The judge looked at David. Mr. Morgan, you acted recklessly by initiating a physical conflict that could not have happened. You are also responsible for the damage caused. Together with Mr. Stevenson, you are jointly responsible for paying $15,000 for the child's treatment. David nodded slowly, as if accepting his sentence. I understand, Your Honor. Emily, who was sitting next to Tyler, squeezed his hand tightly. The boy still looked scared, but there was a glimmer of relief on his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt that the world could be fair. The judge struck the gavel for the last time. The case is closed. Frank jumped up, glaring at Emily. It's not the end yet. He muttered, snorted, and abruptly started for the exit. Emily glanced at him, feeling a chill run down her spine. She knew it was over legally, but was it really the end? Chapter 6. A New Beginning. Emily walked out of the courthouse holding Tyler's hand tightly. The sun was high, flooding the street with warm light, but she felt only exhaustion. Justice was restored, at least partially, but the storm still raged in her soul. Mom, is it really over? Tyler asked quietly, squeezing her fingers. She looked down at his face, the same eyes as his father's, large and inquisitive, but now with an imprint of fear that would not fade for a long time. Yes, dear, she replied, trying to smile. Everything will be fine now. She wanted to believe it. She wanted her words to become true. But Frank Stevenson's voice still sounded in his head. It's not the end yet. They moved to the sidewalk where their lawyer, Thomas Reeves, was already waiting. He smiled kindly, but his face was serious. "You did a great job, Miss Johnson," he said. "The court made the right decision, but you should be careful." Emily pursed her lips. "Do you think he—" "I don't know what's on his mind," sighed the lawyer, "but people like Stevenson don't like to lose. If he does anything suspicious, contact the police immediately." Emily nodded, looked at Tyler. "She will not allow anyone to threaten her son again." "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. We will manage." They said their goodbyes, and Emily and Tyler slowly walked towards the nearby park. She wanted her son to be distracted at least a little. They sat down on a bench near the fountain, where the water shimmered in the sun's rays. "Mom, I don't want to be scared anymore," Tyler said quietly. "I want to skate again, like before." Emily felt her heart sink. She hugged him. "You'll be back, my dear. We've been through this together, and now we have a chance to start over." The boy nodded as he watched the children playing nearby. He may not have been ready to join them yet, but the first step has already been taken. Emily looked up at the sky. She didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. Fear would no longer rule their lives. It was a new beginning. And what do you think? Was the judge's verdict fair? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next crazier thing.